From Acres USA, you are listening to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we'll explore sustainable farming, regenerative practices, and the latest innovations in eco-agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast. Welcome to today's episode of the Acres USA podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, and today we are excited to have our very special guest, Gabe Brown, a pioneer in regenerative agriculture movement and the co-founder of Understanding Ag. Gabe is one of our leading speakers and workshop teachers at EcoAg 2024 in Madison, Wisconsin this December 2nd through the 5th. And Gabe's book, Dirt to Soil, was one of the first books that I read that started me down this regenerative journey. So, as you can imagine, I'm very excited to have a conversation with Gabe, and I'm looking forward to having him and his team down in December. And I think what they've done for regenerative agriculture and agriculture in general over the last 10 years has been a very special movement. So, sit down, enjoy, listen to our conversation, and we'll see Gabe this December. All right, we're joined with Gabe Brown. Gabe, thank you for joining us. I guess to lead off, I'd just like to thank you because you were Dirt to Soil was probably, I think it was book number one, or at least the first book that really captured me. And I listened to it. Oh man, I've probably listened to it 10 times because as I started farming, I'd always go back and listen to it because, the first time when everything is brand new, a lot of it went over my head. And then as I farmed, I started listening to it again. I'm like, okay, so that makes sense, and started connecting the dots. But I always say the way that you put that book together and how it, it really changed a lot of the way I view things, and it motivated me to follow a lot of the teachings and things that you talked about in there. So thanks for creating that. I'm sure you've heard that a lot, but that's an important book, and it made a huge impact on people.
Well, thank you, Taylor. It's great to be with you today. I appreciate those kind words. I tell people Dirt to Soil is a simple book wrote by a very, very simple man.
Yeah. What was I guess you want to go back and talk about your initial, I think the thing that sticks out in that book always is the story about how you had 3 straight years of hailstorms. And I also kind of paralleled with you, where I grew up in the city or town, didn't farm, but knew, I don't know, I think it's something in our ancestral genes or something in there that pushes you this direction. So what are some of the things when you were younger that that pushed you to get into this spot that you're in now?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I grew up in town in the city of Bismarck, and my parents did not farm, obviously, but I had an uncle who farmed, and I always enjoyed going out to that farm, spending a little time. But then when I was a freshman in high school, I took a vocational agriculture course, and I knew from one week in that's what I wanted to do with my life. I was just enamored by all things agriculture, started working on farms during the summer and after hours, during the school year, and fortunate enough to marry my college sweetheart, who happened to be from a farm, and the rest was history.
It's always smart to marry into land. I know that your story is a little different than that. So what was some of the lessons you learned? You guys, you'd moved out to the family farm, and I think
Yeah,
that story is very similar to a lot of people's stories, how these operations get handed on to the next generation.
yeah. I was actually going to college. We were married after 2 years of college, and I was finishing my degree. I was going to be an ag education instructor because I thought, well, pretty difficult to enter into farming, but I could at least be involved by being a vocational agriculture instructor. And then my wife has two sisters, no brothers, and her parents called us one evening and asked if we'd be interested in returning to the family farm. And I, uh, I, of course, enthusiastically said yes. My wife was pretty hesitant. She always said she married a city kid to get away from the farm. Here I was forcing her to go back, but we've been married 43 years now, so I think she learned to put up with it and appreciate the farm again. And we moved back to the farm, spent 8 years learning how to farm from my in-laws, and my father-in-law was very conventional, heavy tillage, half summer fallow, half crop, set stock grazing on the livestock, and started renting our own land, and then all of a sudden one day they called the three sisters together and said they're going to divide up the farm three ways and sell each sister a third. We were fortunate that they sold us the home place, but that really taught us an important lesson, though, because we ended up, our rental payments to my wife's two sisters made their land payments. So they essentially got their share of the land free and clear, and we ended up paying for all of it, more or less through the rents. And what that taught us an important lesson when it come down to us transitioning our farm then to our children. And when we have both a son and a daughter, and our son was very interested in ranching and farming. That's all he ever wanted to do. Our daughter, not so much. She uh, moved off the farm and is married and has a great life on her own. But we knew that we needed to do something different. And so we sat down with our children and said, hey, our son, wants to farm. We're going to transition the farm to him, and he's going to know that it's his. And so there is no splitting up and dividing up of the land. And so I think that lesson my in-laws taught us was very important in how we transition the farm then.
What do you think the issue is with handing down to the next generation? Do you think, and obviously you've been on so many farms now, I'm sure you've seen it just outside of your own perspective and situation,
Mm-hmm.
but is it because a lot of farmers, the majority of their equity in their retirement is in the land itself?
Mm-hmm.
So they don't really have a good exit plan. That could be one thing, and I think it's fair that the next generation somehow, gives them that exit plan and helps pay for it. But what is
Yeah.
the psychology behind just the reluctancy to be able to pass it on to the next generation?
You're absolutely right. And I think there's a couple of things that come into play. One is, unfortunately, the current production model today, it's not really conducive to the next generation coming into the farmer ranch. And I tell this story. So our son, growing up in high school, they had an FFA chapter. There was approximately 50 of his classmates were in that FFA chapter with him. Today, he is the only one that's actively farming and ranching out of those 50. And what that tells me is, how sad is that? Now, I'm not saying that those children should have been forced to return to the farm, but you can't tell me that there wasn't more than just my son that wanted to. What that tells me is that chances are the parents did not make it conducive for that child to return. And so they have to make it, the they have to show the children that as an occupation, farming and ranching can be a very good livelihood and return a decent income. And I think that's where regenerative agriculture comes in. We can increase profitability on these farms and ranches and make it conducive to the next generation to come in. The second thing is, I think it's very, very difficult for some parents to quote unquote give up control of that farm or ranch. Let me give you this as an example. Just this past year, I had a call from two brothers in South Dakota, and they were telling me that they were in their early 30s and they were just going to take over the farm and wanted to move it down the regenerative path. And of course, the question out of my mouth was, oh, Dad's retiring. And they said, no, Grandpa, who's 92, is finally turning the farm over. So think of it, their parents never had the opportunity to even operate that farm. Grandfather did and did all the management decisions. So let me just briefly explain what my wife and I did for our son. We knew from when our son Paul was a young age he was going to want to return to the farm. He didn't want to go to college. We more or less forced him to because I thought it was important that he get off the farm because that's the only thing he had known, for a few years anyway. So what we did, we set up a income earning living trust. We put the land in a trust. Paul, our son, was both the executor of the trust and the beneficiary of the trust, which meant that when we pass away, he knew the land would be his. Now, it's income earning from the standpoint my wife and I, if we so choose, could garner income from that land as long as both or one of us were alive. In other words, if we so choose, we could choose to have Paul pay us rent as long as we're alive. And that way, Paul knows that he's working his life and that land will be his. It also gives us the option, if we want, that we could garner an income from that if we so chose to do so. Now, obviously, with understanding ag and some of my other business interests, we don't need the income. So we're not doing that, charging him at this time. But it's a way that could ensure that the next generation knows that they'll get the land. The older generation knows that they have income. Now, another thing that comes into play is many parents think, well, we have to divide the land up in order to be fair and equal. Well, I don't think they're the same thing. So what we did for our daughter is we took out life insurance policies on my wife and I. She gets the life insurance policies when we pass. Is that worth as much as the land? No. But is it equal? No. Is it fair? I believe so, because our son spent his whole adult life helping to build that farm to what it is today. So I think it's the best way we could set it up for a smooth transition of the farm.
How did you convey that message to your daughter? Because obviously that is an
Yep.
issue. I sell land for folks, and you always can tell when someone's come up, a listing comes up, and there is this there's contention between the
Yep.
siblings.
And the way we did that, which I think is absolutely the right way, is we sat down with them right when my son entered college. His sister, our daughter, is a couple years older than he. We sat down with both of them together, explained what we planned on doing and why, asked them if they had any questions, and our daughter said no. She said, I think it's just fine because I don't have an interest in farming. And she knew she was going to get these life insurance policies eventually. So the thing is, you have to be open up front right away. So they knew from early on that's how it was going to be, and that was our wishes.
Yeah. How important is the entrepreneurship spirit where you have alternative income sources?
Yeah, and realize when Paul returned from college to the ranch, one of the things we demanded of him was that he bring additional income opportunities to the ranch. So Paul is solely responsible for adding the poultry enterprise, the sheep enterprise, the hog enterprise, and then the direct marketing. That was his way of adding value and bringing additional income to the ranch. And I think that's important to do. Now, as a father, I could have said, "Oh no, I don't want any chickens on my ranch. I don't want any sheep on my ranch." Who am I to say that? If my son wants to um, be ambitious enough to bring those income streams, why wouldn't I let him try? Because if he's going to fail small. You know, we always start small and grow. So I think that's one of the challenges. You know, I go into the corn belt nowadays, and what do I see? I see corn and soybeans. Okay, what is a child going to bring to that farm? Okay, because the father will say, "No, we grow corn and soybeans." Well, okay, you're really locking things tight then for the next generation and not giving them ample opportunity.
And it's the ability to pivot, right? So corn and soybean operations, you are you're locked in. You are
Yeah,
you
you're exactly right, Taylor. And you know, oftentimes when I travel, I'm visiting with farmers, and they're what's the price of corn? What's the price of beans? And they'll ask me, and I say, I have no idea. Corn is but one of, you know, a dozen different cash crops we grow. It's one of 17 different enterprises on our farm. It's such a small fraction of what we do. That makes us very resilient to these swings. You look at what's happening now, of course, in the commodity market, prices are way down. Is it going to affect Brown's Ranch? No, hardly at all, you
yeah.
know, because it's such a small part of everything we do.
Well, I think the lessons of regenerative agriculture, where diversity is usually right in the center of it, is actually really good lessons for the business side as well, where you know you have multiple crops, you have multiple species, the diversity is there, but then it follows with the business as well.
Well, and you know, once things turned around for me and we dug out of the hole of those 4 years of natural disasters, uh, obviously the first thing was crawling out of debt. But then once we started to accumulate some cash, what did we invest in? Okay, I didn't invest in more farming. I didn't buy more land next to me. What I did was invested in other businesses and enterprises, you know, outside of farming. That added revenue streams and made us even more resilient.
What was your mindset like? Because I think one of the issues I see right now is, say a new farmer comes in or a new operation, they might get money from somewhere else. Um, Almost always in the first couple of years, they face these challenges that they presume as crippling. How important is it? Part of farming, part of business entrepreneurship is just always moving forward, not quitting. But do you know of a farm or a farm operation that has started that hasn't had some sort of, in their opinion, tragic event or something that was going to stall them? It's kind of part of the deal.
Yeah, no, to answer your question, no, I don't. They all have something occurs. But this is what one of the lessons I learned early on. You know, I was fortunate enough to be able to borrow some money, start to grow the operation. Then those 4 years of disasters occurred. At the end of them, we were over $1.5 million in debt, which in 1998 was a pile of money. Still is today, but it was even a
Yeah.
lot more back then. How did I get out of debt? Okay. I really practiced what I call holistic money management. And one of the first things we did was sit down, and we had a budget, of course, but we figured out what absolutely has to be paid. Well, we got to pay the interest on our notes, you know. We have to pay the real estate taxes, or else we'd have to sell land. Then we got to make the land payments. Okay, we have to pay ourselves first. And I think this is very, very important. And this is a lesson that's hard for a lot of people to understand when I talk about it. But as farmers and ranchers, we usually pay ourselves last. What that does is that puts a tremendous amount of stress on the family relationships. And you look at the amount of divorce rates in farming and ranching, the stress because of money is high. So we actually paid ourselves first. If you have a hired help, you're going to pay them. Okay, times get tough. Are you going to ask them to give you the money back? No. Okay, they get paid first. So why shouldn't we? So what I'm saying is we paid the expenses that we absolutely had to, payments, interest, taxes, health insurance, land payments. Then we paid ourselves. Okay. Whatever money was left, that's all we had to operate on. Okay. Now that might mean that, boy, the cattle aren't going to get vaccinated this year. Boy, I'm not going to buy cow cake for the cows. They're going to have to learn to rough it a bit. You know, no, can't buy that piece of equipment, even though it was old and used. I can't afford it. Not going to buy it. You know, we really were able to crawl out of debt rather quickly with that type of a mindset. And I think that's really important. So, going back to talking about our son bringing those new enterprises onto the farm, one of the things we did for him is we told them he has to start small with cash and he cannot borrow money. And what that taught him was, boy, he couldn't spend any extra money, besides what the enterprises were generating. But then he grew as his cash grew. And I think that's really important. Taylor, for 20 plus years, we ran an internship program on our farm, and we had interns come in from 2 to 5 a year. And one of the first things I'd hear from them is how, oh, we want to buy some land. I want to buy some land. And I'm going, that's absolutely the wrong thing you can do. You don't know yet what you're gonna like, what enterprises is gonna fit your mindset. What you really need to do is start small, grow your enterprise, build your clientele, rent a place. Different places will come available. You'll know when the right time is. But at that time, you'll have the money to make a decent down payment. You'll be comfortable in where you're at, the location that farm or ranch is, and you'll already be somewhat established, and you'll be financially able. Worst thing you can do is saddle yourself with debt early.
Yeah.
And so our son now, he's 36 years old. He operates a 6,000 acre uh, ranch, and he does it with cash. He's never borrowed money. Okay, now that's not easy to do. It's not easy to do at all. And it's not like we gave him money. But the fact of the matter is, he understands just the value of that money and how important it is to not be in debt. Now, I'm not saying there's never a time or place to borrow money, but your options are a lot greater if you're not saddled with debt.
Does he leverage at all operating lines, or do you just put your nose down and say you've got to carry cash over the next year and then you can expand?
Yeah, and he does have a line of credit at a lending institution. It is rare that he would use it. He does not borrow operating lines, so he carries enough cash over. But this is where, I talked earlier about use the example of a corn bean farmer, or we could use the example of a rancher who sells all his or her calves in the fall of the year. They really get income
Yeah.
only once per year. Whereas Paul, with his diversification, he's getting income all year, so the cash flow is there year round. So he's not obtaining an annual operating line of credit.
What was the most important thing that got you in a good place? Was it the diversifying of different products? Was it the direct to consumer idea? Which thing would sticks out in your mind as the thing that pushed you guys over the top?
Yeah, I would have to say faith is number one. I have to have faith. That's number one. Number two would be loving, caring wife who had a lot of patience and belief in me to not walk away. But then I would have to say the third is I did what other people didn't want to do. And by that I mean we have to take a look at our farm or ranch and determine what can I do here at a low enough price point to make decent money and find the market for it. You know, too often farmers and ranchers are very good at producing things, but they're terrible marketers. So, what I did early on, I came across during the years of hail and drought, I started planting winter triticale, cereal rye, hairy vetch. And anybody who's combined hairy vetch knows that it's not easy to combine and harvest. But I found a market for it, and then I helped make that market. You know, by me growing it, showing other ranchers in the area, hey, I can seed this crop in the fall, produces good grazing in the spring. I can hay it off. I can even combine it. I mean, there's a lot of different, and it's a very low input from a dollar standpoint crop. It gives options. Well, that became my most profitable cash crop year in and year out. Uh,
You'd sell the
since,
seed.
yep, I sold the seed. Since 1994, my average return per acre has been $974 net profit per acre on that crop. Well, how many corn producers, soybean producers have that kind of net profit per acre? Yet that probably got me out of debt more than anything else. Is I was going to do things that others didn't want to do during those years, and shortly thereafter. I was putting up 7,000 square bales of ditch hay, carrying them out of the ditches one at a time, throwing them on a trailer, selling them to people who had horses for a decent profit. And I was getting the ditches. Nobody hayed ditches at that time. So I begged them from all the neighbors and they let me hay them for free. Now you got to put up with all the diapers and tin cans, but you know, I was doing things like that, diversifying, doing what others didn't want to do.
Yeah, hairy vetch is an interesting crop to me because it seems like it just is resilient and wants to grow wherever you throw the seed.
It is. And the seed I have today comes from the original seed I bought back in 1994 from a farmer in northwest Minnesota. And I have never had it winter kill on my farm. It's resilient. We keep our own seed back. That's another thing I did. Started saving my own seed. So the oats, the rye, the winter triticale, the hairy vetch, that's all seed that I've grown on our farm for 20 plus years. Think of the savings in seed cost. And now, when we know about with what Dr. James White talks about with rhizophagy and the biology on the seed, little did I know back then I was really doing a wise thing by keeping my own seed.
Hi there, just wanted to interrupt this episode to make sure that you have heard about our Acres 2024 Eco Ag Conference. This year's event will be held in Madison, Wisconsin from December 2nd through December 5th. I think we have put together one of the best lineups for a conference in the regenerative and organic agriculture space. Gabe Brown, Alan Williams, and their team from Understanding Ag, along with Joel Salatin, John Kemp, Gary Zimmer, Mark Shepard, Dr. Nasha Winters, Megan Neubauer, Matt Powers, Nigel Palmer, Will Harris, Jeff Poppin, Aaron Silva, Austin Unruh, Andre Liu, Jay Fuhrer, Steve Diver, and many more. So if you're interested, feel free to give us a call at 970-392-4464 or email us at support@acresusa.com. You can also register online at acresusa.com/eco-ag. Yeah. So your cattle management's always been something that has, motivated me. you want to talk a little bit about how you first got into cattle and then how you guys have transitioned to where you're grazing these cover crops and bale
Hmm.
grazing, and
Yep.
what that did for you?
Yep. So early on, I was enamored by the registered business, and I did sell bulls for well over 20 years. We were selling Gelbvieh balancer bulls, and it was very successful. But I was calving in February and March, killing myself. You know, you talk about stupidity. Calving February and March in North Dakota. That's not foolish. That's just plain stupid. You know, it makes no sense whatsoever. I was living in my coveralls, trying to keep calves from freezing, and then as we went down this regenerative path after those disaster years, I was really, we started grazing more cover crops into the fall and winter. Then in 2003, I started bale grazing, learning from my friends in Canada what bale grazing was. And I noticed that certain cattle, they were easier fleshing, performing better, and I started to gravitate that way. Also at that time, it seems when you go down the regenerative path, you have a journey not only in agriculture, but a journey of your own mind and of your own well-being. And we were starting to pay more attention to what we eat, realizing that grass-fed, grass-finished offered us much more meat higher in nutrient density. And so we were raising grass-finished beef for ourselves, yet I was feeding the bulls grain in order to sell them. And I'm going, this just doesn't make sense. At that time, then Paul was going to college. We knew he was going to come back. And I just told him, I said, Paul, this makes no sense. I'm not going to have you kill yourself, being up for days on end, cabin in the middle of winter. We're going to switch away from this model. We're going to go to a grass based model. And so we cold turkey made the switch from cabin in February and March to cabin in mid May through the end of June. And we informed all our bull customers we were going out of the bull business and we were going to raising grass finished beef, which was a process because obviously Gelbvieh cross do not grass finish very well. So we had to change our genetics, we changed our mindset. By that time, which was about 2009, we had dug ourselves out of debt to the point where we could make the transition and we were ready for what happened. And we had a major fallout of the herd. When you go from calving in February and March, weaning in 1st of September, to calving in May and June and leaving the calves on the cows all winter, you're going to have some fallout. And we did. We turned over well over 50% of the herd in 2 years, but we were ready for it. Those cull cows became the income for those years. And we started keeping back our own bulls, which we had done some before that, but pretty much closed the herd off, kept our own bulls, really focused on survival of the fittest to the point today where we expose heifer calves for 30 days, expose the cows for about 45 days, calve in a pretty tight window. Calves are left on the cows, as I said, most of the winter. And then the cows don't graze cover crops much. They're mostly on native perennial forages and expired CRP ground. But we started, because we have cropland, we want to integrate covers for the health of that soil on the cropland. We started grass finishing animals the last approximately 60 days of their life on covers, and that's worked really well. So we're harvesting the animals at about 29 to 30 months of age, and it's working out extremely well.
And when do you target that 60 days? Is it July and August?
Yeah, that 60 days is August and September. And as a matter of fact, then what we're doing is we are shipping, he's shipping animals to kill starting when they're about 25 or 4 to 6 months old. But then all the rest of them will be harvested by the time they're about 30 months of age. So early October, the last load is shipped off for
Um,
harvest.
What do you do? So I know sorghum is a big part of your cover
Hmm.
crop program. If you're grazing in September and you guys get that first frost, do you get them
Yep.
off the sorghum?
Well, here's what I'm gonna recommend to everyone listening. Yes, pull them off because of nitrates, it's
Yeah,
prussic acid, etc. In saying that, we don't have to do that anymore. We don't have to pull them off. Part of the reason is we have not used any fertility besides what's naturally occurring since 2007. So we no longer, excuse me, we no longer have to worry about nitrates. And what we've found, because of the diversity in the mixes, the prussic acid just is not much of a problem for us. Now, in saying that, though, again, I'm going to recommend to everybody
yeah,
pull them off during a frost. It's
and it's
I don't want anybody losing animals.
pull it off like for 2 weeks.
Yep. Yes.
What do you think is in your blends that offsets it, or do you think it's just the fertility?
I think it's a combination, to be honest. I think the main component is soil health. The soil ecosystem is conducive to providing the nutrients animals need. There's diversity in the mix. The mixes we're using, we really like brown midrib sorghum Sudan, especially the brachytic or the dwarf variety. It holds up better under snow. Um, and after a frost, it won't break down as bad. But then we also put in that mix some hybrid pearl millet. We put some brassicas in there, some sunflowers in there, phacelia, wide variety of different, hairy vetches in the mix. So it's a pretty diverse mix. But then also, I really believe the epigenetics of the cow herd plays a role in it too. We have so many generations of our cattle now that are used to grazing on this that um, we think that's part of it also.
Yeah. How did a call cow become a call cow during that process of changing over genetics? What's it? They would lose
Yep, call
condition. They would just
cow.
be open.
Yep. So what we do not pregnancy test our cows anymore. We do ultrasound the heifers approximately 60 days after we pull the bulls from breeding them, because then that'll determine whether they go in the cow herd or are sold as a bred heifer, or if they go into the grass finishing herd. The cows, to ultrasound or pregnancy test them in November or December, what are we going to do? Wean their calves off and have them in a corral? No. So our philosophy is let's leave them on the cow, let that cow raise it during the winter. Then what we do, the usually in late June, gets towards the end of calving, we go set up corral panels in whatever paddock the cows are in, walk them through. Whatever cow is dry, she either lost her calf at calving time or she was open. Well, what happens to an open cow when you turn them out on rapid growth forage in May and early June? They blow up like a tick, right? And get
Hmm.
fat. Well, when's your hot hamburger market? 4th of July. So those cull cows go directly to kill, go into the hamburger market or made into sticks, jerky, etc. Saves us all the cost of PGN, all that time, energy. It's just a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Works extremely well.
Yeah. It's something that
You
we're.
know, part of the thing about being regenerative is we have to realize that many times in agriculture, we're doing a lot of things that really don't add value. Like, see how we just took all the work of pregnancy testing and that of those cows, and instead we let them add value. It's a win-win situation.
Yeah. It's something that I've been looking into just because of the way the market is right now. Is going and and buying call cows. How long? So you pull them off in June, move them to a different pasture. So you think like 30 to 60 days, and they put that weight on and they finish well.
Well, those cows had been open, and we had weaned the calves sometime in April.
Okay.
Okay, so they had May and June. it doesn't take long. That time of the year, that forage is growing rapidly, and they're gonna, I say we wean in sometime around the 1st of April, late March, early April. Those cows, our cows are pretty thin at that time of year. You can imagine with the calf hanging on them, either grazing through snow or out bale grazing, which are bale grazing. They're out there in the elements, not a lot of great protection. It's pretty hard on them. So
Yeah.
their body condition score fours at that time when we wean. By the time they start calving in mid-May, their body condition score 5.5 and sixes. They'll put on tremendous weight in 30 to 45 days. And so an open cow is even going to do more so.
So you think it's really important to wean them that 30 to 45 days before they put out the new calf?
Yeah, we've found it. So now in a really tough winter, like here a couple years ago, we had 100 inches of snow before Christmas. There we'll wean earlier. We'll wean in late January, early February, because the snow gets so deep they can't graze through it. It's just conditions are too tough for them.
What's your weaning process? I know you get you.
Yeah, weaning process is pretty simple. It's just uh, we actually have a 3-strand high tensile fence with water. We'll the cows will be out grazing somewhere near there. They'll start coming up for water. And then what we'll do when we go to wean, we'll actually just sort them, put the cows back out, leave the calves in, put some bales in for the calves. The cows, if they want to eat or drink, they got to walk a long way the other direction. They'll come back once or twice, look over the fence at their calf, and then it's a done deal. They could care less.
How many
So
days?
yeah, usually within 4 or 5 days, it's done process.
So you make
And
sure.
then the calves go right out on grazing, stockpiled forage. If the snow is gone, they'll go back out grazing stockpiled forage in a different direction.
So you have the amount of herds that you run. You have your. Do you run your stockers and bulls together?
So the bulls are the only thing that's separate, and that's simply from realize we have 20 some bulls, 20 to 25 bulls at any given time because we're keeping bulls back of our own and developing them. Those are run in a separate area. We have a half section of land divided into several paddocks. The bulls are there when they're not breeding. Okay. And they're kind of, we don't spend a lot of time besides making sure they have water. That's about it. And then moving them from time to time. Then we run primarily 2 different herds during the grazing season. We would like to run one herd and have everything together, but the way our land is split up and with the housing developments we have around, it becomes much more labor intensive to move the whole group. Whereas if we keep them in 2 herds, we have the cow calf at one unit, and then we have the yearlings finishers at another.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we run them. And they're moved daily during the growing season.
So you guys will be putting on a 2-day workshop at the Acres conference, and a lot of what you're talking about is a 6-3-4 method. And I know you're short on time, so do you want to talk about what you guys have developed at Understanding Ag, and a little bit about what that workshop will be about and what people will get out of it?
Yeah, we're really excited to be coming to the Acres conference. My partner, Dr. Alan Williams, myself will be there, and we'll have four of our consultants joining us, and we're going to discuss primarily profitability. You know, uh, we all want to enjoy farming and ranching. We want to do it for all the right reasons, but it needs to be profitable in order for us to really make it a career and an endeavor and bring future generations in. So the 6-3-4, what that stands for is the 6 principles of soil health, the 3 rules of adaptive stewardship, and the four ecosystem processes that Alan Savory talked about. And we learned years ago that those four ecosystem processes are constant everywhere in the world. And so, all of us on every farm or ranch, our goal should be to drive those four ecosystem processes: the energy cycle, the water cycle, the nutrient cycle, and biodiversity. Those four are key. Now, how do we enhance those processes and drive them? Is through the six principles of soil health and the three rules of adaptive stewardship. So, what we're going to do is during that 2 day workshop, we're going to talk about the 6-3-4 and how it pertains to any farm or ranch. Doesn't matter if you're a corn soybean producer, if you're a beef producer, if you got an orchard, a vegetable garden, the 6 and the 3 drive the 4. And we're going to show and discuss with the attendees just how they can utilize the 6 and the 3 to drive the 4 on their own farm or ranch. And we're going to use specific case studies of clients that we work with. We're going to tailor it to the attendees. We're going to spend an awful lot of time answering their specific questions, because realize the first principle in the 6 principles is that of context. The processes are the same everywhere we go in the world. The principle of context, though, is how we fit it to your specific situation, your environment. Your context is going to be different than your neighbors, is going to be different than mine here in North Dakota, right? We all have a specific context. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about it. The other thing we're going to talk about is how what we do at Understanding Ag is we don't sell anything. We don't sell inputs. This isn't about you spending money. It's about how do you take the tools that are available to you on your farm or ranch and use them to increase your profitability. So we really are looking forward to this. We know we have a lot that we can offer and can help people on their specific as to answering their specific questions. And so it's going to be very one-on-one to the individuals who are attending.
What's a a positive case study that you've seen from doing this presentation? Give an example of someone who's taken the
Sure.
principles and had really good success.
Great. I'll give you this example. So, late fall of 2018, harvest was done. I had a young couple that they were grain farmers. They did not run livestock, all rented land. Reached out to me, and they were doing okay, but they said they noticed they were having to put more and more inputs in order to keep yields up and gross the same dollars. But they said they really wanted to see what regenerative agriculture was about. So I got them to one of our 3 day soil health academies. Both the husband and wife came. They really became focused on being intentional, implementing the principles and the rules to drive the processes. Okay. They were already fairly diverse in their crop rotation. They grew approximately 7 or 8 different cash crops. But they started planting cover crops. They would harvest a field one day, the next morning they'd be in that field seeding cover crops because they couldn't combine during the morning anyway. They became very intentional at getting the living root in the soil, collecting solar energy. They became very intentional about the nutrient cycle, biologic testing to see do they have the protozoa and nematodes to consume bacteria and drive the natural nutrient cycle. Fast forward here, just this past February, I got a call from the gentleman. He wanted to stop and see me. So he stopped by the house here and he said, Gabe, I want to thank you. He said, so 5 years, here's what we've done. I've cut my synthetic fertility from 40 to 60%, depending on the crop. I've cut my herbicides to pre-plant only and maybe an occasional spot spray. No pre-harvest burn down, no post-emergent application with the exception of spot spray. So he said my herbicide costs are, I've cut 75%. 100% elimination of insecticides, 100% elimination of fungicides. And then he told me what this has done for my profitability. The last 2 years are the most profitable 2 years I've ever had. We just went and bought a half section of cropland and we paid cash. Think of that in 5 years, what that did for that operation. He said, most importantly, Gabe, my two children who are in high school are now talking that they want to come and make farming their career. So think, if that isn't a testament to regenerative agriculture, I don't know what is.
Yeah. What's an example of folks who've been to the workshop that what's a consistent trait or consistent mindset that don't have success or don't follow the rules, principles?
Yeah, and what we see there, so we literally, understanding ag now, we started in 2017. Fast forward to today, we're actively consulting on over 36 million acres. We're the largest regenerative consulting company in the world. And how did we grow so fast, so quickly? We're very, very good at increasing profitability on the farms and ranches. So what we find is those that are not able to, what they're trying to do is they're trying to skip principles, rules. They're trying to do one or two, but not all of them. They're not becoming intentional, and you can see this over and over. You know, the old adage, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, sometimes the student just isn't ready. They
Yeah.
want to be, but they're just not there. And so, uh, we hear often, as I'm sure you do too, well, this cover crop failed. It's rare that cover crops fail. Now, it is on occasion due to drought, etc., but it's pretty rare. Usually, it's not the cover crop that failed. We just failed to plant, planted the wrong cover crop for the specific resource concern, etc. So, lack of education and understanding is probably the number one reason for failure.
What do you tell people that are hesitant? What pushes them? What's like the first thing they should try? Should they set aside some acreage and just try the principles?
Yeah.
But how long?
No,
How
what we demand of all of our clients is split trials. So we take a field. Every farmer, rancher has a different aversion to risk. What do you feel that you can what's your aversion to risk? Is it 5 acres over the hill where no neighbor will see? I had one new client, 8,000 acres of coverage the first year. He said, makes sense to me. Let's just do it. Okay. We all have a different aversion to risk, but you take that field, you manage half that field the way you've always done it, and then allow us to help you, show you, okay, based on proper soil testing, here's where we think your inputs should be. Okay, let's back off on this. Let's increase this. Let's, do it according to driving the principles. Let's grow a cover. And then let's keep track of profitability. And this is the key. And I tell people, I will take profit over yield any day. We can have high yields and still go broke. Okay. If we have profit and grow broke, that's because we overspent, right? So that's where we start people at. And then we show them on their own land. And I tell you what, once it doesn't take long, they start seeing the difference and then they add more and more acres into the program.
what are a couple things that people will start seeing when they start following these plans? What are some of the key indicators that their
Yeah.
ecosystem is changing?
Yeah. First one is they're gonna see a change in life. They're gonna see more life on the land. We hear that over and over: insects, birds, etc. And then they're going to see water infiltration. When they stick that spade in the ground, they're going to see soil that's more well aggregated. They're going to be able to feel the difference under their feet when they walk onto a particular field. Those are the things we see most readily.
And then how do you see the next 30 years of agriculture? What's your sales pitch for folks to move into regenerative, even if, because every generation has different challenges. So we're almost going through, obviously we have higher land prices, higher interest rates, similar things that you guys dealt with back in the 80s.
Yeah.
What is the key points? What do you see in the next 30 years?
Without a doubt, the number one thing I see is we will switch to where food it becomes, as it once was, preventative medicine. I really believe farmers and ranchers will be paid in the near future based on the nutrient density of the food that they're producing. And that in itself is going to drive major change, because the only way to increase the phytonutrient compounds in food is through healthy soil. And so as consumers become more aware, and it's really happening, you see it because of COVID. We get calls every day from industry, these food companies that want to know more about regenerative ag and soil health and how that'll change nutrient density of food. I think that's the number one driver we're going to see in the next 30 years.
Yeah. All right, Gabe, I appreciate your time. We're looking forward to having you in December, and have a good rest of the growing season. I'm sure you guys only have a couple weeks left. We had our first frost this last week.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure being on. I invite everyone to look us up at understandingag.com, and we hope to see you at the Acres Conference.
All right. Thanks a lot, Gabe.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Acres USA podcast, a podcast production of Acres USA. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production-scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. Find our books and other Acres USA media and learn about Acres USA events at acresusa.com. Read our online magazine at members.acresusa.com, and we'd like to thank Acres USA staff for their contributions to producing this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Weston Larson of Acres USA. We're grateful to our guests for taking the time to talk with us about their experiences.